So good morning, everyone, and welcome to the webinar on Why Go Digital. Welcome also to your presenter, Alan FitzGerald, who is joining us from Melbourne. So Alan will be presenting for approximately the next 45 minutes, and we'll then have some time for questions if you have any at the end. But please do send in your questions over the next 45 minutes, and please use the Q&A option at the bottom of the screen. So Alan is Director of Practice Connections. He's a technology advisor and is also known as a software whisperer. So without further delay, I'll now pass you over to Alan. Thank you.
Thank you, Roisin. Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. I am Alan FitzGerald. Now, I am actually originally from Waterford, although it has been about 30, it'll be 30 years next year when I left Waterford. So apologies for that, but up the daisha, as they say. So for the last 22 years, I have been in tax and accounting software in Australia. So that's taking me from everyone from local vendors right through to global vendors as well. Now, part of the reason that I loved the accounting market, and I know that sounds really strange, and particularly the accounting software market, is that the landscape is constantly changing. And fundamentally, if the governments keep on changing the rules, software has to change the rules, compliance never dies, etc. You get the message. Now, what happens as well is that as times evolve, things change, and in these changes in turn drive vendors to develop and create more efficient ways of processing information with the potential to leading into other opportunities for the businesses that they supply to. So the commercial/business software area is one of those leading software development areas globally. And we see that in areas where right across the spectrum, from engaging clients, supply chain management, billing, turns and earns, cross-border transactions, everything like that. So we're going to explore some of those topics today. People often ask me, so what is it that you do, Alan? Well, this is very simple. A lot of organizations, I've been doing this for about 6 years. So a lot of organizations would love to have someone with my background on board, but fundamentally either don't need them on a full-time basis or don't have I guess the capital to hire someone with my capabilities. So I outsource my skill set. So I basically, I call myself a fractional CTO. So that's a CTO or a Chief Technology Officer for a fraction of the time for a fraction of the cost. And I do that because I am tech agnostic and I'm independent as well. So I don't get paid commissions by any of the vendors that I basically help assist getting into the various clients that I work with. Now, towards the end of my presentation, you will get the opportunity to connect with me if you'd like. And that's going to be using a QR code. Unfortunately, given the circumstances that we're in, we all know how to use QR codes. So a rough overview as to what we're going to be talking about today, which is digitalization. And I'm delighted to have been part of the Digitalisation Hub set up by CPA Ireland and SkillNet. So digitalization, rather than digitizing, if you take it, it's potentially changing a business model, providing new services or adding value-adding opportunities within there. So for a lot of organizations, it can actually be a eureka style moment when they discover what they can do or the potential of doing something new within their business. That could be saving time, creating a more efficient process, I should say, gaining preferred clients. It's always nice to have that preferred client that you can deal with, that you can really take care of it and deal with rather than a vast range of clients and spreading your load. When I think about some of the technologies that you're using today, and this doesn't matter if it's a technology that was released last week or if it was released 15 years ago, I think the originator of double entry bookkeeping, which is Pacioli, or certainly the guy that systematized it, he would be a massive fan of modern technology and the modern software. If you imagine trying to handwrite some of the general ledgers that you do today, it would be an absolute nightmare. So the digitalization process allows you to open up the data that sits within your database, or allows you to get into other areas, as I mentioned before. And the major advantage, particularly in the cloud world, and we'll touch on this in a couple of times, is that the information is available in real time. Now, the benefit of this in particular is that, yes, you're all accounting professionals. However, all of you invariably are dealing with a professional advisory firm. The skill set and the capabilities and the technologies that they use is often very different from what the commercial organizations use. So it benefits the commercial organizations to talk to their professional advisors because of the technologies that they have that you will not have access to. Now, compliance will never die. This is the one thing that will never die. You still have to do your tax returns and lodgements and all that side of things. The advantage of working with your advisors in this case is that they basically have the keys to the mine of your information and can work with you to maximize the capabilities that you can utilize that information with, because they're not only seeing your information, they're seeing it across a variety of industries. Now, some of those accounting firms may have a particular client niche that they focus in on. Now, I did a session yesterday where I used the expression that the Americans have, which when they pronounce the word niche, they pronounce it incorrectly. They say niche, and it's really frustrating. But however, it rhymes with niches make riches. And so the accounting profession, and as in the professional advisors, they're progressively narrowing down and focusing in on particular niches that they're harnessing because they can benchmark across those various industries. That will directly benefit yourself. Why go further with digitalization? Now, there's a famous quote. Benjamin Franklin said, there are two sureties in life, which are death and taxes, right? You can fundamentally add changing technology to those because like rust, technology never stands still. So it's one of those things that never sleeps. And what COVID has particularly taught us is that despite the fact that you've always had responsibilities, now those typically are to the business, obviously, you've also had little time and lots of stress. So stress rich and time poor. So part of the digitalization hub, and please ask any questions as you do along we go along the path, is that they're taking some of the concepts and some of the services and software offerings that are in the marketplace to basically benefit your organizations. Now that might involve major change. It could involve minor tweaking. But the key thing is to keep integrated with that digitalization hub. So what fundamentally changed for businesses, certainly in Australia, and I'm presuming that the same happened over in Ireland as well. For those bricks and mortar businesses, when shutdown came, they had to radically change their approach. And so a lot of them went online very, very quickly. So one of the biggest growths, I think the statistic I saw the other day, there was a 272% increase in web services, that style of area from moving from a bricks and mortar environment into a more online shopfront. Now, those things aren't going to revert back to the bricks and mortar. They're going to substantially enhance what the bricks and mortar are already operate within. I don't know if the scenario is the same in Ireland, but I'm assuming that it will be. So over the coming months, what you're going to have the opportunity to do is to meet with some of the vendors, see the latest innovations, and the exciting element that CPA is going to be with you on this journey the whole way. One of the quotes that I use in every one of my presentations is this particular one. Now, the original quote from that crazy-haired Arthur Schopenhauer, and if you are ever interested, he's came out with some fascinating stuff back in the 19th century. But he spoke about truth coming in through those three stages. I bracketize those and talk about technology, because every technology, when it's first released, people go, no, that's ridiculous. Why would anybody want to do that? And then fast forward a couple of years or even a couple of months, people are going, yeah, of course, that's the norm. Why aren't you doing it? If you're not doing it, you've got rocks in your head. So it's difficult to foretell what's going to happen over the next 10 years, but certainly the experience that I can see from what's happening down in Australia, and that part of the reason that I think is pertinent from an Australian perspective is that if you look at how where we are in the scheme of things. So we look at New Zealand being primarily at the forefront of particularly cloud technology. Those guys are about 2 years ahead of Australia. So they are seen as kind of like the breeding ground for innovation and a novel way of approaching things. Australia then follows about 2 years behind that. We've got some very clever companies. In fact, some of them I've introduced into the CPA Digitalisation Hub. which may be beneficial to your organization. The UK, typically we find, is about 3 to 5 years behind Australia. And then the US is, about 45 years behind everyone else. So the benefit of what I guess the Digitalisation Hub is doing, but also talking to someone like myself, is that I can kind of see what's going to happen and what's going to come next. Now, I can't foresee the future. I can create time travel where I can save time, but obviously I can't foresee the future. But some of those trends we'll explore in this particular session today. The recurring themes that I see in any kind of business, be that a startup, be it a company that's been around for 200 years, or an accounting firm, is that there's 5 main areas. So it's the productivity. That's all about manual processes. Manual process, collaboration with clients. Typically, they're on older systems, and there's lack of integration. It could possibly be the same for the companies that you're working within, because companies tend to buy software and not change them because it's often too hard to change those softwares. Frustration, again, I see a lot of frustration in every company. That's generally why the phone call comes through saying, can we have a chat, because we've got some issues that we need to resolve. Finding stuff, where is that file? Where is it on the system? There could be manual processes that haven't been updated for a long time. There could be multiple touch points through a transaction. It's about understanding where those pain points are, and also a lack of automation. So a lot of those older systems, they don't have a lot of automation in them. And I'll come to some of the things that can address those into the future. Pricing pressure. Everybody's under pricing pressure these days because people want stuff for less. So what is incumbent then is in your organization to try and reduce the number of manual processes and increase the automation within there. Now that can then lead into workflow. How do we manage workflow in the business? So job handling, inventory management, supply chain management, waiting for information back from clients. Is there ways that we can improve those processes so that the business becomes more and more efficient? And then the last bit, which is the future planning side of things, that might be succession planning. Where do you want to, or to whom do you want to hand the business over to? Or where do you want to grow to go from a growth perspective? We want to take on new marketplace. What are the implications of going into a new marketplace? So and other areas that might come into there are business continuity planning, or BCP, one of those terrible acronyms that you'll see around the place. Basically, all of these areas are kind of like the famous build a better mousetrap and the world will be a path to your door. Digitalization is about trying to build that better mousetrap. Now, the way that I look at these things is that it doesn't matter if you're starting out in business, and it's never been easier to create a business than previously. If you own an established business, or you're working in, or you're part of, or you're the head of a department reporting through to a board, in essence, you're the owner of a business unit, and it's your job to create the infrastructure to make that business unit as efficient as you possibly can, not only for yourself, but for your team, and ultimately through to your clients. So one of the mantras that I have when I work with clients is that basically I want to try and make it easy for you to do work with your clients, and in turn for your clients to work with you. So really quite simple in that space. This is one of the key areas that I see a lot of firms struggling with, or a lot of companies struggling with, is that you don't necessarily rise to the level of your goals, but you're actually hampered by your systems. And this is one of those challenges that every organization faces if they don't take the time to reflect on their business processes and see what is happening out in the marketplace. Now, one of the advantages if you're in the cloud is that obviously you've got efficiency, flexibility, and capability. So you can give your team members, you can give your clients, access to information that previously was locked up in those what I call legacy systems, or abandonware, as they're sometimes known as. But the other advantage of cloud-based systems is that they basically started with a clean sheet of paper. So unlike legacy providers, now when I mean legacy, I'm talking about providers that have maybe in the industry for the last 10, 15, 20 years, maybe sometimes even longer. There's systems out here that have been going for at least 30 or 40 years. They have a lot of expectations set upon them that if they create, for argument's sake, a new cloud product, that the features and functionalities from their old solution are replicated in the new solution. And that's kind of difficult to do because just a way of changing technologies and the expectations, but also the time to market. So cloud solutions and these new disruptors in the marketplace, they start with a clean sheet. Now, a lot of them are starting because they've identified, if you think of, I'll use Xero, I'll just give a shout out to Xero at the moment. Xero started purely because of the frustration that the founder, Rod Drury, had with their incumbent supplier. Why can't I do this stuff? And so he got so frustrated, he created his own company, which is the Xero that we know today. So when you think of the legacy systems, they often have features just for feature's sake, because typically their customers are paying them a lot of money on a monthly basis to maintain those systems. So the perception of value, we better put in a feature that they may or may not use or haven't even asked for. So the disruptors, these cloud-based systems, they're basically saying, look, this is the problem. This is how we fix it. We're not interested in being everything to the world. So we're just going to fix this particular problem today. And that's what makes it really exciting, because often there are several of those cloud vendors out there solving issues. So that you don't have to rely on one, you can rely on looking at a variety of solutions that can fix that problem. And that, again, is where the hub will come into play. So the advantage of this, I guess the ability to choose systems is that if you trial a system and it doesn't quite work for you, it is remarkably easy to swap it out into the future with minimal disruption. Many of the vendors even give you a free trial, so a 30-day free trial, or will just give you a license. Ask for some training, because there's nothing worse about taking on a new piece of software without any kind of training. Ask for a bit of training, see how you go, and you'll be able to determine in a relatively quick time if that piece of software is going to be suitable for me or not. Now, many of you would be familiar with this particular curve. If you're not, it's called the Everett-Rogers diffusion of innovation curve. Bit of a mouthful, I appreciate that. But fundamentally what it means is how technology is embraced over time. So as you see down the bottom, there's a little drop of blood. They're the guys that stand outside the Apple store, queuing for days, waiting to be the first. They're the guys that are just on the bleeding edge, hence the drop of blood there. They're the if you're on the edge, you're taking up too much room type of guys. So when you look at technology and the adoption of technology, a really interesting thing happened in 2020. When the pandemic hit, certainly in the Australian context, I can only speak from this context, but I'm guessing that it was replicated in Ireland as well. Anybody that was to the left of that curve, so innovators, early adopters, and the early majority, found the transition to working from home and changing business systems, changing business processes far easier than the ones that are on the light, so the late majority and the laggards. Now, the ones on the right were by far the organizations that were affected the most. So the message is that companies can't rest on their laurels, because what happens is that by the time the early adopters or the early majority get to that top of that curve, they're already looking for the next thing. So they're already, because they're kind of keen, they're excited, they want to see what's happening out in the marketplace. They're learning about more efficient systems. And this cycle continues, and it basically never stops. So the problem is, the further that you are to the right of the curve, down at the very first one, the harder it is to gain a competitive edge over those that are already several generations ahead. Now, unfortunately, the same curve applies to vendors. So the further to the right of the curve, the harder it is for those vendors to compete with the up-and-comers. And that goes back to my analogy before of features for feature's sake that I used earlier. So the Everett Rogers diffusion of innovation curve applies to both the clients as well as the vendors. And it's very important to work out. And I'm going to ask you towards the end of the slide deck today, and there's only about another 10 or 15 to go. It's not that bad. Where you see yourself on that curve, and then to think where you'd like to be on that curve. So let's have a look at some of the stuff where it can all lead to. So the key thing here is that when it comes to disrupting companies, it's not actually going to be the technology that's going to do the disrupting. It's going to be the companies that use the technology that is going to be your major form of disruptor. And that's coming back to those, the up-and-comers. If you think of the rise of more flexible ways of doing business, particularly in these weird times that we're going through, that was a disruption, albeit forced upon, particularly to the bricks and mortar companies. That was an event that was forced upon them that necessitated a radical rethink of how can we still service our clients in a more efficient way by giving them access to e-commerce sites, billing, banking, buy now, pay later, client relationship management, client engagement, stock inventory management, supply chain management, which ultimately leads into that turns and earns. The more effective that you're able to do those kind of changes, the more effective and more responsive your bottom line was. This in turn leads into how people interact with technology. So this is aimed more at the companies, so the organizations I'm hopefully talking to today, rather than the end clients, but it does affect the end clients at the same time. So I'm going to show my age here. When I first started work in our office, we had a telex machine. Now, if you don't know what a telex machine is, Google telex machine, and it'll surprise you what it is. But that was an early form of email, but it was priced by the character and it was priced by the time you spent online on that. It was horrendously expensive and horrendously slow. The office that I worked in got our first fax machine, I think it was in 1991. And that was a revelation. It was like the fact that I could send a page of text from one side of the world to another, and they would get the identical copy, including diagrams and all that stuff that was written on top of it. Then the mobile phone came about, right? This is obviously a more modern mobile phone. Back in 95 was my first mobile phone. Now I've got a drawer. I'm sure I've got about, in fact, I know in that drawer just behind me over there, I've got about 4 mobile phones just sitting in there, just in case. The mobile phone has completely democratized technology. So it is now the lever to that people can they can set up a business using a mobile phone. It's quite amazing what it can do. And so the interaction between the companies and the accounting firms, this is a big dilemma for the accounting firms at the moment, because they're suddenly not necessarily not needed, but the reliance on them isn't as great as it was, particularly in those compliance, like setting up a companies and just basically doing the day-to-day work. Because when I first set up my own business, I used a mobile phone. I didn't go to my accountant. I didn't do any of that startup work because I could do everything. I had a general ledger system that I could use online. I could send invoices. I had my stock, everything. I could do everything on my mobile phone. I didn't have to worry about it. And this is the challenge, is that for what you're doing, the market has changed at the end stage. So if someone wants to buy something from you, there's the access to seeing it from a variety of sources, from either buying it locally or buying online from a US company or a German company or French. It's very easy to be able to do that. So the challenge from a lot of these things, when you look at how these people work and interact with technology, is that the future is basically going to be a best of breed approach on a cloud platform, capitalizing on mobility and data. So being able to crunch those numbers and being able to get the best result for your end client within there. Now, as I said, compliance will never go away. So it's one of those things that you do absolutely need to work closely with your advisor on that. And again, with the availability of all of this information, your advisor has specialist tools that you won't have access to because they're not generally sold to commercial organizations. And one of those things is being able to, I guess, assist you from a business perspective. Again, going back to my original analogy of benchmarking against similar firms or similar companies in a similar industry. Importantly, I want to talk about how software is priced. And this is a really interesting facet. I'm going to keep it short. There's three key areas when it comes to determining the price of software that you purchase. It's price, functionality, and service. Now, each of those is interdependent. Have a piece of software that's too highly priced and it's got super amounts of functionality. There's going to be a high level of service that's going to be attached to that. There's obviously going to be a high price. There's going to be a high level of functionality, but they won't necessarily get a lot of clients because it's so expensive. Conversely, price your software too cheaply and you have the negative effects. The service will be reduced, the functionality will be reduced. So it's an interesting balancing line. You can slice and dice those three criteria, so functionality, service, and price. And that's where there's a sweet spot in there somewhere depending on the vendor that you're actually talking to. Now, I'm going to change things slightly differently. And I'm going to pull up a whimsical photograph here. Now, this is a technological evolution. And I have to say that at the start, someone pointed out this at a presentation I did recently, which is that everything in this picture wouldn't fit in your pocket. It was like, well, the man obviously wouldn't fit in my pocket. But it talks about the democratization of technology and where everything now literally resides in the palm of your hand. It has never been easier to set up your own business, create a company, create an accounting firm, doesn't matter. The capital outlay required today is no longer an impediment to creating a company or creating an organization. Now, per one of the previous slides, it's going to be the companies that are using the technology because it's cheaper, it's faster, it's more intuitive than ever before. And these are going to be your competitors in the marketplace, the people that have got the mobile phones, because if they're unhappy, they're going to move and they're going to go somewhere else. Change of theme. One of the areas that I often get asked a lot is about the area of robotics, process automation, machine learning, and artificial intelligence. There's a lot of buzzwords going around on this. There's a lot of so-called pundits out in the marketplace forecasting the demise of the entire accounting fraternity, saying it's dead, that's it, AI is going to take over everything, you're out of a job, you might as well pack up, go home, it's too hard, it's all going to be, it's just a disaster, you're out of a job, it's never going to get right. I don't believe that that is the case, absolutely no way. But I'll explain that in a few minutes. Right now, I just want to give you a quick overview as to a snapshot as to what I think robotics process automation, machine learning, and artificial intelligence are all about. I use Bruce the Brawn. All right, Bruce the Brawn is robotics process automation. What is robotics process automation? Well, it's kind of like giving someone a task and they just complete that task. They never complain. It's just done over and over and over. So they can take a process and they can automate it and it just keeps on doing it, which is fantastic. Now, the challenge with that is that if it's a bad process in the first place, it's just going to be a bad process sped up. Now, invariably, bad processes come from older software and often, in some cases, bad coding. So if you're working from a situation where you're working on old databases, yes, it is a fix, but I would view it as being a temporary fix. So it's one of those things where, it will solve a problem for you, but it is not necessarily the solution, if that makes sense. The next stage along is machine learning. Now, I use a coffee machine as an analogy here because coffee comes in a variety of forms, as you know, and your preferred type of coffee is dependent on a whole variety of inputs. That could be the water, the hardness of the water, the temperature of the water, the coffee bean, the blend of coffee used, et cetera, the milk, how it's frothed, the temperature, and so forth. So what machine learning does is it basically takes inputs from a variety of Bruce the Brawns and basically collaborates collaborates with them and consolidates all of them and sits back and looks and goes, they've done this in the past. Let me replicate that again. And so if you think about machine learning is in common use today in a lot of cloud ledger systems, if you're using some of those. So bank reconciliation, auto coding of transactions. So basically the machine is in essence learning where to put stuff based on how you've done it in the past. That is absolutely fantastic. Machine learning is probably one of the fastest growing areas within the accounting fraternity, and so be it, because what it's ultimately doing is saving you a massive amount of time in order for you to be able to focus on other areas. The next stage along is AI. Now I call him Brian the Brain. AI takes the information from the previous two, but doesn't limit to a small amount of information. It can take in vast quantities of information and process them and give you information back or data back based on an exception ruling, which is basically saying, you know what, I'm not 100% sure that this is right, or if it's wrong, can you please take a look at it? And it's these particular areas that the accounting profession is utilizing, especially in the audit world and the audit technology world. Now, this has benefits for commercial organizations as well, and I'll go into those in a few details. But if you can picture being able to analyze millions upon millions of transactions, I won't say necessarily in the blink of an eye, but you can, in essence, in the blink of an eye compared to manually processing them. And it's about identifying risk, creating those benchmarking typical scenarios, but also then, as we'll see, developing what I call the continuous audit, or what is known as the continuous audit. The continuous audit concept is where an accounting firm, in essence, does a mini audit utilizing these AI-based tools across your general ledger so that they can see what is happening in your systems and actually come back to you and say, hey, we've identified a risk area within there. Now, accountants are renowned for looking in the review mirror. So they're looking behind them. That is their general historical perspective on your company, which is great that they've told you what they can tell you what you did last year. What these AI tools are actually enabling them to do is to basically give you real-time information to enable you to work into the future, and plan and mitigate or offset any potential risks into the future. That is one of those exciting areas. Now, some of these solutions, think of IBM Watson, they were typically the preserve of the large accounting firms who had a lot of money sitting behind them. Nowadays, even the small firms can rent IBM Watson. It has truly become democratized. Now, the key thing about choosing any of these solutions is that you should get good, solid advice. Now, you'd probably suggest, you're probably thinking, this is probably where he's going to say, call me. The reality is, call someone like me, call someone in your marketplace that you can trust and say, I'm thinking of getting into this space. It is it's a rabbit hole. When you go down those rabbit holes, it will take you all over the place. So if you do understand what you want to try and get, then it's a really good opportunity to get into that space. Now, the reason that I prefer actually to call artificial intelligence assisted intelligence is because of this particular slide. And I'll get you to take a look at that. The key reason for this is that the human brain is absolutely amazing, right? So it can process hundreds of millions of transactions or the equivalent of hundreds of millions of transactions or processes every second. And to try and replicate that is next to near impossible. Now, robotics process automation, machine learning, artificial/assisted intelligence, they're already helping organizations, big and small, to eliminate or reduce data entry, quickly access breakdowns or analysis required to do, like preparing some board papers or review some cash flow forecasting, etc. Being able to put in variables in there and see what the outcomes are going to be. And that's absolutely fantastic. And you'll see some of the examples of that in the Digitalisation Hub. Accounting, though, as I mentioned, is typically retrospective. So this is actually something that you can change for the future. Now, I would ask you, for companies big and or small, is to talk to an accounting professional that does the audit, has an audit function within there, because I think you would be absolutely amazed at some of the capabilities that they can offer to you. Now, from a commercial perspective, there are plenty, depending on the solution that you use, as your general ledger or ERP, there are solutions out there that are suitable for month-end closing, receivables, payables, etc. So there's a whole pile of opportunities that you can get to benefit you, improve your systems, customer service portals, etc. Key thing, talk to your advisor. Now, sorry, I know I'm talking at 1,000,000 miles an hour. I apologize. I think, how am I? It's 10. Okay. I can see a couple of questions coming through. I will get to those as soon as I can. One of the big questions that I get asked is like, everything you're saying, Alan, sounds really good, but we spent a stack on this particular software 10 years ago. What are we going to do? Look, I'm going to assume that the software that you bought has created for you a profitable business, profitable enterprise. But if you look at these systems as being similar to like a car, maybe a 10, 20-year-old car, fundamentally a brand new car versus a 20-year-old car is basically the same. So they both get you from A to B. However, the newer car, be that hybrid or even electric, is going to get you there faster, potentially, depending on the speed limits. It's going to get you there a lot more comfort. There's a lot more bells and whistles in newer cars than there was ever conceived in older cars. If you think of even going from a manual transmission to an automatic transmission, the fact that you don't have to take care of any gear shifting anymore, or these funky cars that can do the automatic parking for you, that's what we're talking about as an equivalent of newer systems compared to those legacy / abandonware systems. And that's the key benefit of all of this. Now, the challenge, so I guess in essence, you're both figuratively and literally in the driver's seat to be able to change and evaluate what systems are in the marketplace to be able to make your business more efficient and more capable / more profitable into the future. The challenge that I see is that a lot of the ERP vendors, the commercial organization vendors, they've been kind of, especially the older ones, they're kind of a bit complacent. They said, no, look, they're not going to change. It's too hard to change. We'll just keep milking them for as long as we can. So, your faith in the vendors has not necessarily been reciprocated with their faith in you. The other significant advantage, as I mentioned before, is that the cloud vendors in particular have a back to basics rather than a back to complexity approach. So they start with a clean sheet. Now, the biggest change is that traditionally you had a suite of solutions, and the mantra used to be you have to have a suite to compete. These days, you can have a best of breed approach, all talking to a central point. Now, the best of breed approach allows you the flexibility and the capability of choosing the systems that you want to use, rather than a system in that suite which is not going to be the best of breed. And that is the key element and the key differentiator in the whole, the best of breed approach, and particularly in that cloud environment approach. I can see there's a stack of questions come through. We'll get to them in a few minutes. Blockchain. I'm not going to spend too long on blockchain, but I get a lot of questions about it when I do these particular sessions. My philosophy, as you've determined, I've got a lot of philosophies. My philosophy on blockchain is don't worry about it. Now, that might sound a bit like, oh, what? This guy's nuts. What do you mean don't worry about it? Everybody's talking about blockchain. Yes, everybody is talking about blockchain, but right now it's nothing's happening overtly with it. And to give you an example, the analogy that I like to use is if you think of what the internet was back in about 1992, 93, maybe 94. Back then, it was touted as being the thing that was going to change our worlds. It was going to be amazing. We're going to be doing some fantastic things into the future. And oh my God, you'd be insane not to get on board. And most of the reaction was, yeah, okay, fair enough. Great. I'll just go back to work then, shall I? Blockchain is fundamentally the same. So if we fast forward to 2021 and I ask you, what does the internet do? You kind of would go, oh, everything, really? Doesn't it? Doesn't it do everything these days? I'm pretty sure it does. That is what blockchain is going to do, right? So we can see it already in some areas that are non-financial. And what I mean by that is the sourcing of food. So like identifying where, for example, an avocado came from, if it's organic or not. Real estate. So the contracts exchange. So being able to lock down the contracts in such a way that they cannot be changed in any way, shape, or form. The supply chain management. We're seeing blockchain in supply chain management, but we're not seeing a lot of change in the financial spaces. And that's why I say don't worry about it too much. It will come. So you'll find, particularly in the audit world, I think they're going to face some challenges, but not for another maybe 5 to 10 years. Because if you have blockchain is what's known as an immutable ledger, which means it cannot be changed by any external party. You have to be inside that to be able to make those changes. You've automatically got a ledger where it's difficult to make any kind of changes. So why do you need it to be audited, right? And that's where I think they will struggle into the future. But right now, it forms the backbone of cryptocurrency, and that is an entirely other conversation, particularly for the accounting fraternity and how to sort out tax within cryptocurrencies. But the way that I see it, unless you're in that supply chain management, unless you're in the food sourcing business and you want to be able to say, this strawberry came from this particular farm in County Wexford, then it's going to be a challenge that you'll see that it's going to evolve over time and then all at once. The other thing that I always like to talk about is data analysis and data visualization. Now, you've probably heard the phrase, it's been bandied around. I don't particularly like it for the following reason, which is that data is the new oil. Everybody's talking about data being the new oil. Look, data is oil, right? It's when you first get it, it's generally crude, it's slippy, it's unrefined, it's very messy. And by the time you've refined it to the point that you get what you want, it's time. It takes a lot of time. But strictly speaking, data is not the new oil. It's the end result or the client experience. What will this, if I extract this piece of information and I analyze it, what does that ultimately mean to either, well, basically to the end client, the old what's in it for me? And that's the key thing, in my opinion, that data is all about. So if I look at, it's about being able to give your clients better, higher valued experiences. Now, again, I'll talk about partnering with an accounting firm or an advisory firm because they get to see this on a regular basis. There are some most amazing data analytical tools that are in the accounting market space. So they have got these fantastic tools to enable to work with you to improve your businesses. The challenge with the older legacy systems is that the information tends to be bound up within those systems. But now a plethora of data tools has emerged over the last couple of years, and all of them are fantastic. Don't get me wrong, they're all of them fantastic. And they can extract data from a variety of sources. However, the data has to be relevant to be, has to be accurate to be relevant. So my message to you from when it comes to data is use it wisely, as the cartoon shows. You can have all of this amazing stuff, but it's actually understanding what it fundamentally means within there. And more importantly, that it's relevant to the task at hand for you. Moving right along, because I can see that I'm actually doing okay on time for a change. Roisin will be delighted sitting in the background. Microsoft Office. I love talking about Microsoft Office because there's a great quote, which is Archimedes. He once said, "Give me a lever long enough and a fulcrum upon which to place it, and I can move the world." Microsoft Office is one of those levers. So most companies are using, obviously, Outlook. They're using Word, Excel, and more recently Teams from a management perspective, which is fantastic because they open up a lot of opportunities. But it's only one small component of Office 365. Now, Office 365 is an absolute gold mine because what it can do, it's an integrated set of tools, and often they can replicate those of third-party tools which are sold at a premium. So the challenge that I would suggest to you is that if you have the opportunity to review what your tech stack is currently, I'd also get you to take a look at what is possible within the Microsoft Office space, because in essence, you're already paying for something and you're paying for it again. Now, the reason why I talk a lot about Microsoft Office is that there's few people in the market that are actually talking about it because there's more money to be made selling those third-party apps. And I've got an example of some of those on the screen here. So there isn't actually any money to be made selling Microsoft Office unless you're a Microsoft. Now, there is a market, a side market, which is does the tweaking, as I like to call it, of the systems and ensuring that they get the best components of that and they match it to what your requirements are. Yes, that's going to cost you a bit of some dollars to do that, or some euros to do that. But if you can reduce the complexity of your tech stack by using the existing platform that you already own, you're going to be ahead of the game. So regardless of whether you're at the beginning of your journey of setting up a company, you're in the more mature phases of digitalization, doesn't matter. There are many ways to accelerate the process of using a product, as I said, that you already own. Now, like the old expression from the 1960s, I don't know how many of you would remember it, nobody ever got fired for buying IBM. Nobody ever got fired for buying Microsoft Office because it doesn't cost much and it offers a humongous amount of value. Now, the challenge then for any system that you do purchase is that you have to maintain it. I have come across so many organizations in my time who do not maintain the systems that they're utilizing. And that is the problem. They buy them to fix a problem that happened at a particular juncture. And from that point onwards, that's all they think it does. Oh, it fixes that problem. And they don't review what's happening within that solution. I presented at a conference a couple of years ago where it was at a general ledger conference, QuickBooks. And in the lead up to that particular conference, there must have been, I think it was about 1,200 people or 1,200 companies at that conference. There was a hackathon from one of the local universities. And in that hackathon, they challenged the university students to create a product in 24 hours. And a group of students created a warehousing application with artificial intelligence hooking into QuickBooks that was live and working. They actually did it in 27 hours. And that's how fast it is that these cloud solutions can develop. But it's also then, if you have an existing cloud solution, it's then how quickly these updates can come out. So typically cloud solutions release updates about once every fortnight, sometimes maybe once a month, depending on the type of the organization. So it's key that you have a staff member across what the changes are within the firm. Here are some thoughts about digitalization. I'll let you read those one by one. The key one for me is number 4. So the Chinese philosopher, I think his name is Lao Tzu, said that, and everybody knows this one, a journey of 1,000 miles starts with a single step. I don't think so. I think it would have started with a plan, because there's no point in embarking on one of these journeys unless you have an idea of what you want to achieve at the end of it. So the benefits of digital transformation are numerous, be that meeting evolving client needs, anticipating changes into the future, retaining or attracting top client to your organization. So the digital hub is going to give you the exposure to a whole level of experts in a variety of industries, so both commercial and in the accounting industries. They're going to give you tips, there's going to be webinars, and there's going to be real case studies that you can actually capitalize on and see if they can match with what you want to do within your own organization. So these industry leaders are going to be guiding you. The team at CPA Ireland are going to be guiding you, which I think is fantastic. And they're going to tell you how they have implemented digital transformations within their organizations or within their clients within there. And it's going to give you a great understanding of the tools that are available and exist in the marketplace. I mentioned earlier, I was going to show you this slide. This is the second last slide. So you're probably going to be either delighted or really disappointed that this is coming to an end. So it goes. I'd like you to look at that slide and reflect where you are now and where you would ideally want to be. And this is the idea behind the Digitalisation Hub. It's about saying, if I want to be an early adopter, what do I need to do, or what do I need to have based on my specific requirements? So take a look where you are now and where you'd like to be into the future. And with that, my contact details are going to come up in a second. I'll leave that slide up there. I'm going to take a look at some of the questions that have come through. Get out your mobile phones. There's a QR code which will take you directly to my LinkedIn profile. I write, some would say, ad nauseum about the accounting and tax industry and the commercial industry as well. So I hope that you've enjoyed some of my perspectives, and I know some of them can be a little bit strange and a bit different, and how they might be able to affect your business. Please do connect with me on LinkedIn. Feel free, get involved with the Digitalisation Hub, and I think we'll open up, there's a couple of questions that have come through, so let me just go into those. Paging Roisin, if you're there, or Rachel.
Yep, I can hear you, Alan.
Great
Can you see
stuff.
the questions that have come in?
Yes, there's one here. In contracting with vendors, this is from Leonard. In contracting with vendors for existing software support, what timeline would you now advise? Contract. Okay. I actually had a session with one of my clients today because they are actually going through that digitalization process. One of the key advantages that they have right now is that nothing is broken. So what we're showing them, or what I'm showing them, and I had a session with a crew in the UK this morning. I've got one with a company out of a supplier out of New Zealand next week, etc. What I'm showing them is that what the future can be and how we can hook them all together. So the idea for them is that they'll look at a technology and go, yes, we like that, or no, we don't, or actually, let's look at that in a couple of years' time and see how it develops. If it's not broken, Leonard, I wouldn't change it. Sorry, I'll rephrase that. If it's not broken, then you have a strategic opportunity to make changes. If it's broken, then you need to fix it, and it's a tactical decision. So it depends on the tactics versus strategic and where you are on that Everett Rogers diffusion of innovation curve. I hope that helps. If not, reach out to me, and we can have a further chat on that. What are your thoughts on supply chain management? Okay, this is a great one. This is something that I do get asked quite a bit. Supply chain management is a tricky one, and I have to say it's trickier for you in Ireland than it is, I think, for us out here in Australia, because obviously you're an island, we're an island as well. We're slightly larger than you guys. To give you context, the population of Melbourne alone is 5 million, which I think is about the size of what Ireland is these days, which is quite incredible. So supply chain management. Obviously, you've got things like Brexit in play. You've got foreign exchange. We typically don't. We typically only deal in. I suppose you don't have foreign exchange apart from sterling these days. I suppose that's the only, and maybe the US dollars. Obviously there are reporting areas in there. If anybody on the call is in supply chain management, I would encourage you to take a look at a game called The Beer Game. And this is actually something that I've recommended to all of the accounting firms that I work with. The Beer Game was developed in Harvard. It's free, and it's about the ramifications of the supply chain management when you have a number of players in that supply chain management. It's tricky. If the newer systems definitely can manage supply chain management far more effectively than previously. So it's an opportunity to evaluate what they can do on that side of things. Another question here: who should I talk to? My IT team, accounting advisor, CPA Ireland, or where should I turn? Okay. I have a theory about, or philosophy about IT teams, particularly internal IT teams. There's a difference between an internal IT team and an external advisor. The difference being one keeps the lights on and the other one is advising where to go to next. IT teams internally, look, there's nothing wrong with that. I think they're fantastic. But they're focused on basically the day-to-day activities, like keeping the lights on. From a strategic advice, they're not necessarily getting exposed to a lot of variety and a lot of options. That's why I would suggest talking to your accounting advisor, because they are exposed to a lot of a wide variety of technologies, because they're utilizing it either internally in their firm or they're recommending it to other clients and they're seeing what is working and what has worked effectively. Obviously, CPA Ireland, this digitalization hub, that's why we're all here today. Or someone like me who has basically a wide, expansive view on the marketplace. Now, I know there has to be someone like me in Ireland. If not, again, reach out. I can give you the best advice that I can. Cash flow forecasting. Should we do it ourselves? Oh, yeah, maybe, yes, possibly. I would suggest talking again to your professional advisor, so your advising partner. The reason for that is that they are also seeing it from your compliance component as well, from your annual compliance obligations. They can see it from I think anyway, a much greater perspective. Absolutely, there's plenty of cash flow solutions out in the marketplace, starting with Excel or going through a variety of the vendors that exist out in the marketplace. Even if you just do cash flow forecasting, hit return and see what comes up. Should you do it yourself? That's debatable. I don't know what your skill sets are. So yes and no, if that makes sense. And I don't think there's any more questions on there. Roisin, do you see anything else coming in?
No, I think that seems to be all. There was one there in the Q&A which you did, and then a couple came in on chat. So no,
Beautiful.
I think that's all good. Look, thanks a million, Alan. That was fantastic. Really insightful.
Pleasure.
Yeah, no, I don't see any more questions coming in there. So look, we'll finish up. So I hope everyone enjoyed the presentation, and thanks again to everyone for joining us. Thank you.
Okay. And it's adios from Melbourne. Thank you very much. Say hello to, and if anybody who knows me or knows Jeff's, say hello to anybody in Jeff's. Oh, sorry, Roisin, there's a quick message coming in.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, that was you. Sorry. Thanks.
Many thanks,
everybody.
Many thanks.
And
Thanks,
stay
Megan.
well. Thank you very much.